much. Many places are in the brighter or even sunnier weather behind the weather fronts. But a strong and cold wind will blow on Wednesday, and that will make it feel quite bitter, particularly northern and eastern coasts. And it will also bring some wintry showers, particularly, again, northern and eastern coasts on Thursday. Otherwise, plenty of sunshine away from those coasts, but it will feel cold in the wind on Thursday. Less cold on Friday, plenty more dry weather.
Hello there, I'm Eamon.
And I'm Isabel.
And you're watching the GB News digital stream across the United Kingdom.
And around the world.
If you're here in the UK, you can also watch us on your TV screen. GB News is Freeview channel 236.
On Sky, we're channel 515.
626 on Virgin Media.
Just remember, you might need to retune your TV to watch the channel.
Yeah, and if you are doing that, find out more about retuning by going to gbnews.uk.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilized conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon.
And Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
Good morning, it is at 10 o'clock. I'm Rosie Wright, here to get you up to date on GB News. The Deputy Prime Minister, Dominic Raab, says claims that Boris Johnson lied to Parliament are nonsense. The Prime Minister's former chief advisor, Dominic Cummings, says he was prepared, though, to swear under oath that Boris Johnson lied to MPs when he said he'd not known beforehand about the number 10 garden drinks in May 2020. Labour's Shadow Work and Pensions Secretary, Jonathan Ashworth, says Tory MPs are backing the Prime Minister due to personal reasons rather than national interests.
The question for Conservative MPs is, why are they putting up with this? I'll tell you why they're putting up with this. Because they're weighing up what they think is in their electoral interests, whether they should stick with this guy or get rid of him because of how that will impact on the next election. They should be making a decision in what is the national interest. Winston Churchill said country comes first, not political party. And Tory MPs should have that in their mind today.
Well, in light of the party allegations, here at GB News, we conducted an exclusive poll which reveals that over 2/3 of voters believe Boris Johnson has not told the truth about parties in Downing Street. 83% of Brits also believe the Prime Minister has clearly broken the government's own lockdown rules. And over 40% of voters no longer feel any obligation to obey lockdown restrictions if they were reintroduced after Mr Johnson admitted attending the Downing Street gathering during the first lockdown. Now, in other news, magistrates will be given more sentencing powers in an attempt to reduce the backlog of criminal cases that built up during the pandemic. Then they'll be able to give more serious offences jail terms of up to a year, which is double the current maximum of 6 months. Some critics have, however, called it a sticking plaster solution. The House of Lords has voted against government plans to clamp down on noisy protests. Crossbench peer Lord Colville tabled an amendment to the new crime bill, arguing the original bill could prohibit large, peaceful and well-organised demonstrations from taking place. The amendment would ensure, for example, that there isn't a ban on loud protests in Parliament Square. Britain is supplying further self-defence weapons to Ukraine amid concerns over possible Russian invasion. UK Defence Secretary Ben Wallace says a number of small personnel will also provide training to Ukrainian forces, but stressed British troops will not be deployed to fight Russians. Russia has amassed 100,000 soldiers, tanks, rocket artillery and short-range ballistic missiles at their border with Ukraine. The brother of Angela Glover, the British woman who died in the Tonga tsunami, has paid tribute to her. The 50-year-old from Brighton was washed away on Saturday trying to rescue her dogs after an underwater volcano erupted and triggered a 10-metre tsunami. Well, her brother, Nick Elaney, spoke to GB News and says the family is heartbroken.
He radiated warmth and kindness. She was extremely popular. She's got so many people that have sort of expressed their condolences, people that that she's worked with in the past, and people that live in Tonga. She was my sister.
Well, New Zealand's military is unable to send essential supplies to Tonga currently, including drinking water. Their efforts are being hampered by thick ash which covers the airport runway following the eruption. The number of employees on payroll has grown in December, but average pay fell in November for the first time in more than a year. The Office for National Statistics say the number of UK employees rose by 0.6% in December to nearly 30 million people. Figures also reveal that in the 3 months up to November, the unemployment rate fell back to almost where it was pre-pandemic. The BBC has criticised the government's choice to freeze the licence fee at £159 for the next 2 years. The Culture Secretary, Nadine Dorries, says it's going to help families struggling with the cost of living. But the BBC branded the move disappointing, saying it will lead to tough choices that will impact the viewer experience. Experts in smell are suggesting that COVID infections might be making children fussy eaters. Well, it's down to them potentially suffering from parasmia, which is a disorder where people experience strange and unpleasant smell distortions. It includes things like chocolate smelling like petrol and lemon having a smell of rotting cabbage. Well, Sarah Oakley is the Executive Director of Absent, told GB News getting your smell back after COVID can take up to 2 years.
You have had your sense of smell that attacked high up in the nose by a virus. COVID-19 is particularly good at this. And it's destroyed some of those sensory neurons that carry the signals to our brain. And those neurons, fortunately, are designed to grow back. But while they're growing back, things are a bit muddled.
You're up to date now on GB News. I'll keep you up to date across the morning. Now let's go to the point.
Good morning. This is To The Point on GB News with me, Mercy Muroki, and Patrick Christys on your TV and radio. And we're back with you until midday, as usual, bringing you the day's big stories, interviews with our guests and our opinions as well. So here's what's on the menu today.
Yes, well, Boris Johnson's now infamous ex-aide Dominic Cummings offered Barnard Castle and said the Prime Minister lied to Parliament about his knowledge of lockdown parties. And he's even willing to say as much under oath. Well, that's it then. You can obviously trust every single word Dom says, can't you? Could it be the final nail in the coffin for the Prime Minister, though? And do you even care? We'll discuss.
Yes, and the tsunami in Tonga, caused by the eruption of an underwater volcano 3 days ago, has claimed the life of a British woman and continues to cause devastation. We'll be live at the Tongan embassy for the latest on the situation.
Yeah, we will indeed. And is it fair for companies to have different sick pay rules for vaccinated and unvaccinated people? Well, supermarket chain Morrison's is the latest company to confirm it's cut sick pay for unvaccinated workers who are forced to isolate after being exposed to COVID. It's a very controversial move, and let us know what you think about it at gbnews.uk.
Yes, that is a taste of what's to come over the next couple of hours. And as Patrick said, we want to hear from you. Your views are really important on this show, so get in touch, GBViews at gbnews.uk. We'll read those throughout as usual. But before that, Patrick gives his views on the Navy in the Channel.
Well, it looks as though the Navy may be about to disobey a direct order to turn back migrant boats in the Channel. As part of so-called Operation Red Meat, Boris Johnson is putting the Navy in charge of the Channel, taking over essentially from Border Force. Now, I think it would have been better to call them Open Border Force, to be honest, because more than 28,000 illegal immigrants managed to make it to Britain last year, and more than 550 migrants arrived in just the first 2 weeks of this year. It's clear that something has to change, but the fact is, our current plans to bring in the Navy look like they've been drawn up on the back of a fag packet. Priti Patel said pushing migrant boats back absolutely still remains government policy. The implication there is that the Navy will now be brought in to enact that policy. Border Force flat out refused to obey that order, so presumably the thinking is that the Navy would be more compelled to carry out those instructions. But that doesn't seem to be the case, and I have some sympathy for them, to be honest with you. Numerous Navy sources have said that they don't simply want to obey the orders. In fact, Patel's comments took them by surprise. One source said that no decisions had been made about how the Royal Navy would be deployed. They said talks had been taking place with the government for numerous weeks, but that the notion of pushing boats back had not been discussed. There are concerns as well, let's be honest, that it may be illegal. If it is illegal, then I have some sympathy for the Navy, of course, because, again, let's be honest, nobody will want to find themselves in court for essentially having committed a crime against humanity. But if it's simply a question of ethics, then I'm very sorry, but that's not a good enough reason to disobey an order, if indeed they do. And it looks like it actually might be about morals. In fact, one source told The Guardian, classic, "I'm not sure pushback would work. It's not part of our ethics." I can completely understand this. The fact is, of course, that pushing boats back means that there will probably be more deaths in the Channel. We'll push them back, the French won't take them, they'll turn their motors off, the boats may eventually sink, hypothermia sets in as well, and we all know what happens next. But an order, of course, is an order, and ethics can't get in the way of that. That's not the way the military works. I'm not saying that's necessarily the right thing to do. I'm just saying that's not the way the military works. To be honest, of course, that is, though, a reason why I do have a bit of a problem with it, because there's no two ways about it. If we do operate a pushback protocol, it does mean more migrants die in the Channel. I'm not sure any of us are really OK with that, are we? And this is why I think it's just hot air all over again from Boris and Priti Patel. Firstly, our Navy is now pretty small. We have an obligation in the far Pacific with Australia now. We have, of course, boats in the far north as well to patrol the waters there. Do we actually have the capacity to shove a couple of warships in the Channel? If they're not going to push the boats back, then actually, I think this could be very humiliating for us. Can you imagine the pictures of a dinghy full of illegal immigrants just sailing through two warships before being towed to Dover? It would be a national embarrassment, wouldn't it? So I don't see how it's going to work in practice. It does have the whiff of desperation about it, almost like Boris has, as a last-ditch attempt to save his own skin, just blurted out the words, "warships in the Channel," and expected something to be done about it. Just as a slight side note as well, this Operation Red Meat stuff also includes potentially defunding the BBC. That was making massive headlines yesterday, of course it was. Right, OK, but if you really listen to Nadine Dorries, she talked a tough game on Twitter, but then stood in Parliament and said that the BBC actually, essentially, just has to produce a report showing it's tackling bias. Well, I actually happen to know for a fact that this report is already being compiled. In fact, Robbie Gibb, a non-executive board member at the BBC, is already going round media organisations and think tanks discussing the issue of BBC bias. I know that for an absolute fact. It's almost like they knew this government announcement was coming. But anyway, back to the Channel. It is looking increasingly unlikely that we're really going to stop these boats coming across. It seems unlikely that in practice this government or our Navy would enforce a policy that directly led to migrant deaths. The French aren't going to stop them, are they? And it doesn't seem to matter how much money we throw at them. So, if people are going to keep coming, we need a proper fast-track deportation system. These people may well set foot in Britain, but there needs to be a huge detention centre built and rapid processing. In my opinion, if people can't prove who they are or where they're from, then they must be sent somewhere else. There is, of course, talk of Rwanda and Ghana being used as non-UK bases. I imagine that may have come as a bit of a shock to the people of Rwanda and Ghana, but money talks at the end of the day, and if we are paying them to take these people, then they'll probably do it, in my opinion. That's the way now to solve our migrant crisis. As it stands, illegal immigrants know that they can get to Britain, and once they're here, they can stay here. I don't think putting the Navy in the Channel is going to stop them getting to Britain, so we have to make sure that they know that once they get here, if they're not genuine asylum seekers, then they can't stay here. It removes the incentive and it solves the problem. Yeah.
Yes, well, Operation Red, I really don't like the term Operation Red Meat.
Do you prefer it to Operation Save Big Dog?
Is that one you came up with?
No, that's another one doing the rounds. You've got to save Big Dog.
Yeah, I think there's something about red meat that... Anyway, forget that part. Operation Red Meat is obviously... It's distraction tactics, isn't it? It's a series of distraction tactics that the Prime Minister is being accused of using to distract, of course, from the Partygate and the impending doom that faces him as Prime Minister of the country. When it comes to the, well, it was reported in the Times yesterday, it's still more or less speculation, isn't it? They're bringing the Royal Navy in and what they've said and what the government has said. But clearly it's ill thought through because they would have done it a long time ago. This is not a new problem. I share your scepticism around the validity and the substantiveness of that idea. But I think there's 2 points to make. Is that if you're not a genuine asylum seekers, because there are genuine asylum seekers that do come here, and I think as a civil nation, that it is in our values to offer safe refuge to genuine asylum seekers. And I absolutely think it's the people who are coming here, mainly as economic migrants, who are coming here illegally, who are ruining it for everyone else. I think we need to be much, much tougher on them. But fundamentally, it starts way before they arrive here, doesn't it? Because we have to stop the people smugglers smuggling in the first place.
Well, look, loads of views flying in already. Malcolm's been in touch. Thank you, Malcolm. Without French cooperation, pushback is the only policy that will work. And, there you go. I suppose that's his view. And it's that question, though, isn't it, of how OK are you with deaths in the Channel? Because I'm not, and I think most people aren't OK with deaths in the Channel. And essentially pushing boats back, because the French aren't going to pick them up exactly, are they? Otherwise, we'd have been doing it the whole time. Does ultimately mean that more people die in the Channel. And I very much doubt that people are going to do that. Having said that, there is also the flip side, isn't there, of what happens if the Navy are ordered to do that and they refuse, what actually happens. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is why I wanted to get stuck into this with Rear Admiral Chris Parry, former Director of Operational Capability at the Ministry of Defence. Thank you very much, Chris. Look, from where I'm sitting, there's lots of unanswered questions at the moment. I'm hoping that you've got some answers for us. Firstly, what do you make of the idea of putting the Navy in the Channel? Is it going to do anything to stem the flow of illegal immigration?
Well, excuse me, short answer, no, for all the reasons that you and Mercy just talked about. The issue here, though, is the government is tacitly accepting that they need to bring together all the agencies and departments who are responsible for our offshore zone and the security and safety in our borders under one comprehensive approach. And that's being coordinated by the Navy. That's a really good thing, because until now, this disparate, dispersed approach has actually been working against us. Secondly, unless you're able to process the people that you pick up in the Channel very quickly and very efficiently, we're going to have the same problem as before. And the Navy will simply join a long list of people trying to solve this problem. And I think the politicians will say, well, look, it's not even the Royal Navy can actually deal with this. So how can we deal with it?
Yeah. And you mentioned there that there does have to be a sort of multi-agency, multi-dimensional approach to this. And of course, there does have to be, because it's a very complicated problem. But given the fact that I think we mentioned there 550 migrants have arrived in the first 2 weeks of this year alone, so that trajectory doesn't seem to be waning. We saw the highest figures last year, of course. What needs to be done? Can anything be done? Because they've tried a lot of solutions and the problem's not going away. Surely now we have to say, look, France is the key to all of this. If France don't get a grip, then we won't ever be able to get on top of this issue.
Well, I mean, we need a comprehensive strategy, and we're tinkering around at the tactical level all the time and nothing's working. And as a military man, I can tell you, if you don't get your strategy right, your tactics will always fail. With regard to the French, what we should be doing is putting up, and I've been saying this for some time, a persistent drone that can stay up for days at a time. It can intercept by radar, electro-optic systems, and also radio, telephone, mobile intercept. It can tell when people are getting together to go in the water, and we should be thoroughly embarrassing the French and saying, look, we know when they're leaving your coast, now pick them up. And we should be cataloguing and transmitting every time the French fail to do that. But more than that, and Patrick hinted at this, we should be saying to people, If you're caught without documentation or you're trying to enter the country through our maritime borders illegally, you will never have residence here, ever. And that's something Australia tried. It worked really well. And I'm afraid to say that until our politicians grip this and change the law, we are not going to get any traction at all in the Channel.
What happens, look, we're dealing in hypothetical situations here, but it may well be about to happen, I suppose. If the Royal Navy are ordered to enact the pushback technique or whatever, and they say no, or someone says no, what happens there? Is that disobeying an order?
Well, it doesn't quite work like that. Of course, the Royal Navy, like all our armed forces, are subject to democratic control by our politicians. But if you go back to Nuremberg in 1945, 1946, the law of higher orders states that if that order is fundamentally illegal under international law, then you don't have to obey it. It's as simple as that. Otherwise, you will be held responsible for what happens. So this is not a moral or an ethical issue, as you hinted, Patrick. It's a legal issue under international law. If people are in distress or claim to be in distress, they have to be picked up. That's the law of the sea. And under human rights legislation, that's what we have to do. If we don't like that, we have to change the law and make sure that we can enforce it.
Yeah. So what we've basically just unearthed right here live on GB News is that the Navy is not going to be used to push migrant boats back because quite possibly it's illegal, and therefore they don't even have to obey the orders if they are even given to them. And so essentially, this is nonsense, isn't it?
Well, I think there are better ways of doing this. I have said that we need to introduce a speed bump, if you'll pardon the mixed metaphor, in the Channel, whereby people are not taken directly to shore, they're taken to a place of safety. And that's what international law says. I have suggested in the past that we use cruise liners or ferries as receiving ships where we can process migrants and see whether they are eligible as asylum seekers to come to this country. At the moment, we are just providing more and more taxi services, I'm afraid, for people who choose to put themselves in harm's way, put themselves in danger in the middle of the Channel. There has to be some complicity applied to the people actually undertaking these voyages, because they are putting themselves in danger. One of the things I used to really quite resent as a search and rescue aircrew was actually having to go out and rescue people who had deliberately put themselves in danger. And some element of responsibility has to be applied to the people undertaking these journeys.
Good stuff, Chris. Thank you very much. Thank you for your time this morning. Rear Admiral Chris Parry, of course, just whizzing you through essentially his take on what's been going on the Channel. And it was fascinating that to get the inside kind of info really from him. It's like it's going to work, does it? So.
No, like the long list of things that solutions put forward to this problem that have yet not worked.
No.
So will be unsurprising. Lots of your views coming in about this. Unsurprisingly, Mike here says, until you stop the attraction, you won't stop the problem. When they arrive, they get lots of freebies, basically, and it's not surprising they think it's the land of milk and honey, which is a view put forward by lots of people. And hey, that is true, but are we a civil society or not? What else are we going to do? Just let them roam on the streets? Of course not. We look after them and we treat them like human beings.
What they're saying was we could put a massive projector on the White Cliffs of Dover that only plays Mrs Brown's Boys and just hope that they turn themselves back. But anyway, after the break, we'll be asking whether the UK is actually safe for women, discussing everything from stalking to if misogyny should be categorised as a hate crime. It comes as a new law as well, as apparently supposed to be put to Parliament, put to our politicians to try to help the victims of stalking get better care. Don't go anywhere.
Hello, good morning. It's cold out there this morning, a widespread frost and some dense fog patches to watch out for. It'll be bright once those fog patches clear, but it will turn cloudier by the afternoon, certainly compared to yesterday's sunshine. High pressure still in control of our weather, so it's keeping things settled and mostly dry for the time being, but these weather fronts will introduce thicker cloud and some rain later in the day. Already a cloudier start for northern and western Scotland, parts of Northern Ireland. Frost and fog more limited here, but widely elsewhere. Fog, dense fog patches to watch out for on the roads first thing, and a widespread frost. Areas of cloud will move up from the south. They'll tend to help lift the fog across central and eastern England, but one or two patches remaining into the afternoon. And where that happens, it will feel cold. Meanwhile, cloud and outbreaks of rain will turn up into western Scotland and Northern Ireland. The wind picking up here as well. and in the far north that wind nearing gale force by the end of the day. So spells of rain for Scotland and Northern Ireland overnight, the rain tending to be on and off, accompanied by that brisk wind, pushing the cloud and the rain then into northern England, parts of Wales overnight, and with cloud tending to move south through the night, frost and fog won't be as widespread. 1 or 2 patches still possible, but generally a less cold start to the day on Wednesday because of that overnight cloud cover. And there'll be some outbreaks of rain first thing, moving south across central and southern parts of the UK, clearing quite quickly, I think, so that after lunch, many places are in the brighter or even sunnier weather behind the weather fronts. But a strong and cold wind will blow on Wednesday, and that will make it feel quite bitter, particularly northern and eastern coasts. And it will also bring some wintry showers, particularly, again, northern and eastern coasts on Thursday. Otherwise, plenty of sunshine away from those coasts, but it will feel cold in the wind on Thursday. Less cold on Friday, plenty more dry weather.
Hello there, I'm Eamon.
And I'm Isabel.
And you're watching the GB News digital stream across the United Kingdom.
And around the world.
If you're here in the UK, you can also watch us on your TV screen. GB News is Freeview channel 236.
On Sky, we're channel 515.
626 on Virgin Media.
Just remember, you might need to retune your TV to watch the channel.
Yeah, and if you are doing that, find out more about retuning by going to gbnews.uk.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilized conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon.
And Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
Good morning, everyone. It's 26 minutes past. This is To The Point with Patrick Christys and Mercy Muroki. We're right here on GB News, live on your TV and your radio.
Yes, good morning. Now, a woman who was last seen leaving a nightclub in Windsor early on Sunday morning was found alive late last night. 18-year-old Marnie Clayton didn't return home after going out with her friends, but of course now she has been found, and our London reporter Alice Porter is with us now to give us the latest. Thanks for joining us. I'm guessing her family would completely relieved, because these stories don't end very well for some women we know, don't we?
Yeah, absolutely. It's very, very good news for Marnie Clayton's family. As you were saying there, I mean, she left the club at 2 o'clock in the morning in Windsor, just a sort of normal night out, like it is for so many women when they go out with their friends. But her parents reported her missing at about 3 o'clock in the morning, and they said they were very concerned and that this was really, really out of character for her. So Thames Valley Police, they launched quite a major investigation trying to find her. And the good news is that she was located safe and well yesterday afternoon. But there are a number of quite important questions that need to be asked, because a 21-year-old man from Reading has been arrested in connection with her disappearance, and he's been held on a number of quite serious charges, including false imprisonment, suspicion of battery, and making threats to kill. She was also found 30 miles from where she went missing. She went missing in Windsor, and she was found in Basingstoke, but she actually lives in Bracknell, so there's a lot of questions to be asked about really what happened over that 48-hour period. arrested. And of course, those charges are very serious in relation to this 21-year-old man who has been arrested. And it raises some very important questions, really, about women's safety.
Yes, indeed. Well, look, Alice, it does, and I'm sure, obviously, of course, as more comes out, you'll be joining us with it. It really is, well, it was terrifying stuff. It's very sinister stuff as well, but thankfully it seems to have had a decent ending. But look, thank you very much, our London reporter there, Alice Porter, to bring you the latest on that story. Right, well, look, sticking on this issue of women's safety now, the parents of a young woman thought to have been murdered by a former colleague who stalked her are presenting a petition to Parliament over the next few weeks.
Yes, the petition calling for Gracie's Law to give more support to stalking victims now has more than 104,000 signatures. Gracie Spinks, 23, was found murdered in a field in Duckmonton in Derbyshire on the 18th of June last year. And this comes, of course, as the House of Lords yesterday voted against government plans to make misogyny a hate crime in England and Wales.
Well, joining us now is Gemma Aitchison, founder of Yes Matters UK, a group dedicated to preventing, challenging and improving the support of sex-based crime victims and their rehabilitation. Thank you very, very much for joining us. Gracie's Law essentially wants to give more resources, doesn't it, to police, to local constabularies, so that they could actually help victims and indeed put more resources into investigating claims of stalking. I'm assuming that you think this is a very, very good idea.
I do think that it is a good idea. However, I am cautious because we already have the Dash assessment that is supposed to do that for stalking, and it's not being used. And we have lots of crimes about how we can address violence against women and girls, and they're just not being convicted. So although I wholeheartedly support the notion behind this change, I wonder if in practice, like many other things, it's actually going to be used.
Yes, and we know that there have been tragic stories before of women who've had multiple reports or reported to the police multiple times about stalking. You know, what any of us would obviously know is stalking, and it takes a long time for them to do anything, if anything at all. What do you think they should be doing then? Because there'll be a lot of young women who, you know, they post their lives online, that people have a bigger profile now, I suppose, than it would have been the case a couple of generations ago, because all it takes to do to find somebody is put their name into, you know, a social media app. What should women do, or what should the government do, to protect women who are probably more exposed to things like stalking than ever before?
They should actually do something about it instead of giving women yet another thing to do. I think the last thing we were supposed to do was to flag down bus drivers. It seems this never-ending list of pointless things women and girls are supposed to do. So I think what the government should be doing is, first of all, we need to have, I suppose, a perpetrator database. So things like stalking and things like flashing and sexual offences, domestic abuse, as we saw with Wayne Couzens and many other men who go out and kill women. They always have these serial offences in their history. So what I would say is to actually take these things seriously when they're reported, actually do something about it, which will prevent many women's lives being lost in the first place.
Yeah, indeed. I actually spoke to a criminal psychologist, a forensic psychologist on this yesterday, and he said one of the tactics that a lot of these stalkers use is that they find it, because a lot of them are kind of slightly above average intelligence, some of them, they're well, it's quite psychopathic, isn't it, a lot of what these people do. And so he said that one of the tactics that they use is they find it very easy to flip it onto the victim. So they go, actually, hang on a second, she's stalking me. And they're very, very clever in the way that they do it, and they try to make it as difficult as possible for the police. Do you think the one thing the police could do is maybe try to employ more criminal psychologists, right? So they can actually see through these people, and they can say, all right, look, he may well be telling you this stuff, it may well sound believable, but here are all the triggers for it, and actually I can tell you categorically this guy is not right.
Well, that tactic is known as Darrow, where the perpetrator flips and tries to make out that they're the victim. And the thing is that there is evidence and learning on all these tactics. There's training that organisations are trying to give police. the problem is that it's a postcode lottery. It needs to come from the top. And as it's not happening, women are less likely to go to the police. And trust in the police generally is really at an all-time low at the moment, not just for women, but even on the TV recently, we've seen 4 Lives, we've seen the programme about Hillsborough, we've even seen Downing Street where there are police outside of Downing Street who aren't investigating these parties from the Prime Minister. So it seems to be that almost that the police are picking and choosing who they think that they should bother investigating and who they shouldn't.
That's really interesting. And just finally, we have to make a slight correction. The House of Lords voted yesterday to make misogyny a hate crime, not against making. So they voted in favour of making misogyny a hate crime. This is in England and Wales. I just wanted to get your reaction on that, because some people say, hang on, what is misogyny? How do you define it? Could it be something as innocent as making a compliment to a female stranger on the street? Some people have concerns around how you define it and criminalising people for behaviour they might not think is misogyny.
To be honest, I think it's tokenistic. They don't convict rape. You have a less than 2% chance of even going to court if you're accused of rape. So I think it's another tokenistic exercise to say, look, we care about women without actually doing anything. Regarding those concerns, I think a really easy way to consider whether something's appropriate or not is just to think, well, would I be okay with a man saying this to my daughter or to my mother or to my sister? And if the answer is no, don't do it. It's not really a difficult thing to not harass people, for most people anyway.
Gemma, thank you very much. Thank you for giving us the time this morning. Gemma Aitchison there, founder of Yes Matters UK, which is a group dedicated to preventing, challenging and improving the support of sex-based crime victims and their rehabilitation, of course, as well. Just in light of Gracie's Law, really, as well, and, of course, these new misogyny becoming a hate crime as well, which I think is a step in the right direction.
Yes, well, we will be going to your views very shortly after a break, and we'll also be looking at the devastating tsunami in Tonga and the tragic death of British national Angela Glover. But before that, a look at this morning's news.
A very good morning. It's 10:35. I'm Rosie Wright to keep you up to date on GB News. The Deputy Prime Minister, Dominic Raab, has described claims that Boris Johnson lied to Parliament as nonsense. Well, Boris Johnson's former chief advisor, Dominic Cumming, says he's prepared to swear under oath that the Prime Minister lied to MPs when he said he didn't know beforehand about the No. 10 garden party in May 2020. Well, GB News has carried out an exclusive poll to find out what British voters make of the fallout. It reveals 2/3 believe Boris Johnson has not told the truth about parties in Downing Street. 83% of Brits also believe the Prime Minister has clearly broken the government's own lockdown rules. And over 40% of voters no longer feel any obligation to obey lockdown restrictions if they were reintroduced. Now, in other news, magistrates will be given more sentencing powers in an attempt to try to reduce the backlog of criminal cases that built up during the pandemic. Well, they'll now be able to hear more serious cases such as fraud, theft and assault and give jail terms of up to a year, which is double the current maximum of 6 months. Britain is supplying further self-defence weapons to Ukraine amid concerns over a possible Russian invasion. The UK Defence Secretary Ben Wallace says a small number of personnel will also provide training to Ukrainian forces, but he stressed British troops will not be deployed to fight Russians. Russia has currently amassed 100,000 soldiers at their border with Ukraine. New Zealand's military is unable to send essential supplies to Tonga currently, including drinking water, as thick ash covers the Pacific Island airport runway. It's after an underwater volcano erupted and triggered a 10-metre tsunami on Saturday. You are up to date now on GB News. We're on your TV, online and DAB Plus radio. I'll keep you up to date across the morning. Right now, break and then back to the point.
Hello there, I'm Eamon.
And I'm Isabel.
And you're watching the GB News digital stream across the United Kingdom.
And around the world.
If you're here in the UK, you can also watch us on your TV screen. GB News is Freeview channel 236.
On Sky, we're channel 515.
626 on Virgin Media.
Just remember, you might need to retune your TV to watch the channel.
Yeah, and if you are doing that, find out more about retuning by going to gbnews.uk.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon.
And Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
Yes, morning everybody, it's 10:39 and this is To The Point with me, Patrick, Christys and Mercy Muroki right here on GB News, where of course we're on your TV and now on your radio.
Yes, indeed. Now, an underwater volcano that erupted 40 miles north of Tonga on Saturday, causing a tsunami and devastating nearby islands, has killed 2 people in Peru, over 10,000 kilometres away. A British woman, Angela Glover, is the first known casualty of the tsunami after her husband, James, recovered her body. Well, Angela's brother spoke to us earlier about his late sister.
She was extremely popular. She's got so many people that have sort of expressed their condolences, people that that she's worked with in the past, and people that live in Tonga. She was my sister. She came from a large family. She's got 3 brothers and 2 sisters. She was the youngest, and she was loved by all of us.
It's devastating stuff, isn't it?
Yeah.
Really, really tragic stuff. Our national reporter, Paul Hawkins, is here to tell us more about the situation in Tonga outside the High Commission in London. Look, Paul, thank you very much. What have you heard then? What's the latest?
The latest is that information still very limited coming out of Tonga. We have asked to speak to the Tongan High Commissioner, who hopefully we'll hear from later in the day here on GB News. But at the moment, information coming out of Tonga very limited. They're still trying to re-establish communications to the area. What we do know is that runway in the capital, Nuku'alofa, the runway there still covered in thick volcanic ash, and that is making it impossible for New Zealand, who are the only country that have sent ships and aid so far. It is impossible to get aircraft onto the runway at the airport so it can deliver much needed water, survey teams and helicopters to the area, so they can start to survey the area and really try and get an idea of the situation in Tonga at the moment. The Red Cross is saying 80,000 people could be affected by this wave. When you think that there's just over 100,000 people in Tonga altogether, 170 islands, it's about the size of Japan. 80,000 people out of 100,000 people. That's most of the population of Tonga that will have been affected by the volcano and by the tsunami that followed. I've spoken to the Disasters Emergency Committee here in the UK. They're still waiting for more information to try and get a better idea of the picture on the ground before they work out if they're going to send any aid, if they're going to coordinate all the charities in the UK to start gathering aid, start gathering water supplies, that kind of thing. And then if that happens, then they've got to work out how much is needed to send over to Tonga. But at the moment, New Zealand, the only country really offering any sort of assistance, and they're blocked by that volcanic ash which is on the airport. At the moment, 2 people confirmed dead, as we've heard there, very sadly, one British woman, Angela Glover, but that death toll is expected to rise as the situation becomes clearer. But we're still waiting for more information from Tonga.
Yeah, Paul, look, thank you very much for that summary of what's going on there. Fingers crossed you get to speak to the High Commissioner later for us as well. Paul Hawkins there outside the Tongan High Commissioner.
It's very devastating, particularly when things like this happen, because they're so unavoidable, isn't there? So arbitrary, so random. It's such a natural disaster. I think they're saying it's the biggest eruption in 30 years of an underwater volcano.
Once in a 1,000-year... event, apparently. Apparently, there's the scale of it. They were saying that a volcano like this would have an eruption like this once every 1,000 years.
Wow. Extraordinary. Well,
it's the fact they're cut off as well, isn't it?
Yeah, that's the thing. They're a very small island, so let's hope they, the death toll doesn't rise at all, and we should get those figures in, of course, as the situation develops. Now, in an exclusive public poll conducted on behalf of GB News about the Downing Street parties, the Prime Minister does not come out particularly well. Over 2/3 of you believe Mr Johnson has not told the truth about parties in Downing Street, which, of course, is what Dominic Cummings is also saying this morning.
Well, yes, Mr Truth himself, of course. But anyway, meanwhile, a massive 83% of Brits believe he's clearly broken the government's own lockdown rules. All right, I wonder how many of those people broke them themselves. But anyway, one other interesting part of this is that 44% of you feel no obligation to follow any further lockdown restrictions if they were introduced.
Yes, indeed. Well, I think, the moral question there of if you're setting the rules for everybody else, I think you have almost a higher burden of having to follow them. So I'm sure pretty much every person in this country at some point, whether deliberately or not, would have broken the lockdown rules. And that's not the point. I think it's the brazenness of it all, what the government or the people in officials and SPADs and whatever in Downing Street were doing, whilst at the same time, sometimes a couple of hours later, going out and telling the public that they'd be killing people's grannies if they refused to obey these rules, and keeping kids off schools, put in this real environment of fear about COVID whilst partying. I mean, it doesn't look good, does it, at all?
Look, it doesn't look good. I think strongly, actually, that the main reason people are angry with Boris, the main reason why people are potentially a bit fed up with him or whatever, if indeed they are, it's not just because of these parties. I don't really think... I think the parties were almost the kind of the cherry on top of that cake, as it were. I think a lot of people are very angry because he's not the man that they feel like they voted for. He's not really behaved like a Conservative, has he? And you can tell that he's clocked that now, because what is Operation Red Meat? It's basically populist policies, isn't it? It's basically Conservative policies, like strong borders, like the levelling up. It's almost like he realises now that if he wants to be a Conservative leader in a Conservative country, he should probably start behaving like a Conservative.
Yeah, I think there is the other side as well, of people just not being surprised at all, particularly his opponents, because they'll be saying, well, this is what you voted for, this is the man you get. You knew exactly what it was. He's just not the Prime Minister to lead the country through a time of crisis, really. That's what many people
I suppose
say.
One of the arguments as well would be that, supposedly we're the first country, going to be the first country out of this in Western Europe, and that's a triumph. That is a big triumph. But anyway, right, so the former chair of the COVID task force, Kate Josephs, has said that she is truly sorry for holding leaving drinks in December 2020, breaking coronavirus rules. The implication here, obviously, is this stuff's happening up and down the country. There are now calls for her to lose her job as the chief executive of Sheffield City Council. Our Yorkshire and Humber reporter, Kevin Larkin, is in Sheffield for us now. Thank you very much, Kevin. You look all wrapped up, and I imagine it's very, very chilly up there. But look, run us through what's happened, please.
Well, yes, good morning, Patrick. Good morning, Mercy. So, on the 17th of December 2020, the head of the COVID task force, Kate Josephs, held leaving drinks in her office at the Cabinet Office. Now, this was a breach of the Tier 3 restrictions, which London was in at the time, which said there should be no social mixing of households and people should be working from home. So, Kate Josephs put out a statement on Twitter on Friday, 20 minutes before the Telegraph broke this story, and she said that she was truly sorry that she did this and for the anger that people would feel as a result. And she said that Sheffield has suffered greatly during this pandemic and that she apologised unreservedly.
Oh, absolutely. I think. Sorry, Kevin. I think it was a bit of a error there. But anyway, So do you think this is the people on the ground? Are they actually quite angry about this? Is this more of a political thing to try and get her to go? What's the feeling?
Well, interestingly, the Labour leader of Sheffield Council, Terry Fox, also put out a statement on Friday, and he said that he was deeply disappointed and that Sheffielders would feel angry and let down. But interestingly, Patrick, he does seem to be open to forgiving his chief executive, saying that Kate Josephs is an asset to Sheffield and that she's been working tirelessly for the city. Now, that is not a view that's shared by others. The former leader of Sheffield City Council, the Lib Dem Lord Scriven, he had said that Kate Josephs had to go, and the reaction that I've seen from Sheffielders on social media and from hearing what people have to say is very, very much that she needs to leave her job.
Kevin, look, thank you so much, and bless you. One day we'll get you to go out and just report somewhere from like a nice warm cafe or something, all right? Kevin Larkin, our Yorkshire and the Humber reporter, braving the elements for us to bring us that story. But that just about sums it up, doesn't it? This kind of stuff was happening up and down the country.
Yeah, and I think it's more so a reflection of the fact it wasn't just in the political classes, as it were. I think everybody was doing some sort of lockdown breaking, but when it's the people at the top who are making the rules, then
this is the thing that we have to know. Well, I suppose Sue Gray will determine this for us, won't she? The most powerful woman in the country, but. Is it a sackable offence now? I can understand the Boris Johnson, depending on what happens there. Look, maybe it turns out it's that bad that he's got to go. But, does everyone in a position of remote responsibility who broke coronavirus rules at all have to go now?
Well, I think if he lied to Parliament, and he's shown to have known that they were, because he's saying he didn't know they were parties, he thought they were it was a work event. If Dominic Cummings is saying, actually, I'm willing to, say under oath that he, he's saying that he's saying he can show that he told the Prime Minister that these would be parties and warned him not to go, and that the Prime Minister did it anyway, and therefore that him not knowing they were parties is untrue. If he lied, then he surely has to.
Well, that's it. That is it. What I'm concerned about with Boris is that he may, whether or not people think he should go, he may have just created a situation for himself where he kind of just has to, right? And we'll have to wait and see. We'll have to wait and see. But anyway, the TUC says that more than 250,000 workers are self-isolating without decent sick pay. So figures released by the Office of National Statistics this morning show that unemployment levels have fallen to 4.1%, close to pre-pandemic levels. But what does this really mean for the economy?
Yes, well, joining us now is Justin Urquhart-Stewart, founder of investment platform Regionally and business commentator. Always great to have you on the show. Justin, I just want to get your view on this issue of sick pay, because this will be something a lot of people are concerned about, and they're seeing companies now, Morrison's and Ocado, for example, saying if you're not vaccinated, we're going to cut your sick pay to the lowest level possible, that statutory level. So what is the general situation now when it comes to sick pay and workers?
Well, and the answer is it's very confused at the moment, because in effect what you're saying is actually we're going to put you on sick pay levels when you're not ill. The whole point of having a pay when you're sick is when you're sick. So it does seem really rather perverse. But what these companies are obviously trying to do, and you quite understand why, is that they want to make sure they have as many people at work as possible and not have people off. So therefore encourage people to make sure that they've had as much inoculation as necessary. But if they don't want to conform with it, then they'll be penalised going back onto standard sick pay, which, by the way, if you decide to move on to that, is a jolly amount of £96.35 a week. That's not going to get you very far. The concept's fine, but the legal legitimacy is not clear, because this is not necessarily in your employment contract that you get penalised for effectively not being ill.
Yeah, it's a very odd situation, and I guess this whole saga of COVID has started setting lots of precedents that workers might not be keen on. Just talk to us as well about what we can expect for 2022 in terms of employment, in terms of people's quality of life, and as well, if you can, is there anything to look forward to? Because all we're hearing is the big squeeze and bad news.
OK, I'll try and answer some of that question. I've got all of it. No, the good news is, actually, we've got a lot of people employed. We were thinking you're going to see a much higher level of unemployment. So that is good news. And that's not just good news for the individuals being paid, but if you're being paid, that means you're going to be spending more money. That means you're actually spending more tax for the government. So you're getting velocity of movement of money through the economy. That's one of the key measures you actually have to have, getting people to spend. And good news, such as there is any, actually at the weaker end of society, if they're getting more pay rises there, they are most likely to be ones who are going to be using all that money and therefore paying more tax. When you're dealing with the glorious middle class on higher rates of tax, they might do something as terrible as actually saving money, for heaven's sake. And therefore the government doesn't earn any money out of that one. So we're going to see a confusion over the next few months, and I suspect some of it's going to be challenged in court as to what, under labour law, as to what companies are allowed to do or not. The key thing I think you will see is companies putting through now adjustments to their terms of employment such that they can actually put in controls over being properly vaccinated, making sure that you're having proper checkups and testing, and make sure that's part of the contract. Some people may not like that, but companies are in a position where, look, do I want to make myself as efficient as possible? I need all my staff there as much as possible. I can't be running on 50%, particularly if it means I'm going to be losing orders.
All right, Justin, thank you very much. Justin Urquhart-Stewart there. Fantastic to have you on the show, as always. Of course, whizzing you through with his economic expertise of the current situation that we've got going on at the moment. So fingers crossed there may be some little ray of light at the end of this dark abyss. But we're going to go into my inbox now. GBViews at gbnews.uk. Loads coming in about Boris Johnson and about Dominic Cummings. Hi, Patrick. Would you employ Dominic Cummings? That's from Paul. No. Loads of you also saying, stop bashing Boris. We need to stop bashing Boris. Are we bashing Boris?
Well, we're giving our opinion on what the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom has done, which I think is a perfectly legitimate thing to do. But somebody here says your approach to Boris takes no account of the stress under which his staff were working. He wrongly tried to reward and motivate. Few senior figures are totally honest. So a half defence there of what they were doing. They're saying they were under stress, they had a few drinks, but then other people quite angry, shall we say, because they say, well, my family followed every single rule that was put forward by the Prime Minister, so why should there be exceptions for the people in power?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, look, I've got to be honest with you, I don't massively care about the parties, right? So
that's not what it is, is it?
I've said it. And look, there is an issue, right? There is an issue that we can't ignore, which is that if this guy's in charge, he's making the rules, and people weren't seeing loved ones when they were dying, meanwhile he knew that there were parties taking place in his office/home, then that is an issue for the guy. That's an issue for the guy. But realistically, I'd rather that we were having more of a discussion about whether or not the coronavirus restrictions were right in the first place, whether or not that we should even be in the situation that we're in now, about things like the big green agenda. I'd rather focus on that, or some of the good stuff. Some of the good stuff as well. It looks like we are out of the woods now, and Boris has had a massive hand in that. I'd rather we were talking about that and not parties.
Yes, indeed. Well, you know, I think there's one thing sort of looking back and seeing what we could have done differently and what lessons need to be learned, but some people are looking forward and saying that maybe Angela Rayner would make a better leader of the opposition because she has more fire in her belly than Keir Starmer. So some people may be starting to think now about future Prime Ministers,
I'm convinced
future
she's
leaders.
a Tory plant. But anyway, there we go. Thank you everyone who's been getting in touch. GBViews at gbnews.uk. We will keep them coming throughout the show. We've got loads more coming, loads of top stories and plenty of your views after this break.
Hello again. Another dry day for the vast majority today. A mixture of cloud, sunshine, with some places staying misty with fog, and it's not dry everywhere. We do have some rain across Northern Ireland and Western Scotland, courtesy of this weather front. But it's bumping up against an area of high pressure, so it will be weakening as it crosses into Western Scotland. But it's bringing some wet weather through the morning and into the early afternoon across Northern Ireland for sure, and it will turn damp in Western Scotland during the afternoon. Elsewhere, most places dry, plenty of sunshine over northern England, parts of North Wales, East Anglia too, but there is patchy cloud across the south, and some places not really getting rid of the overnight fog, staying quite misty and murky, and if that happens, temperatures are really going to struggle, but with some sunshine, we should see temperatures generally close to average, 7 to maybe 10 Celsius. We'll see a bit more of that patchy rain just crossing through the central belt of Scotland this evening, and then it stays fairly wet over the Highlands, Western Isles and the Northern Isles overnight. Some patchy rain, perhaps at times drifting into northern England, and things turn damp later in the night through the early hours across Northern Ireland. It'll be a milder night, particularly so across the north, but even further south you could see some patchy fog and maybe a little bit of frost in rural areas, but generally temperatures holding up. More cloud then on Wednesday, certainly for northern England initially and across the Midlands and Wales, a bit of rain early in the morning. That moves southwards and it'll bring the odd spot of rain across East Anglia and the southeast. As that clears through, brighter but colder weather will arrive. But temperatures through the day should still, at least for a time, get up to double figures across the south. But colder air is arriving in the far north. Some wintry showers likely over the Northern Isles and the northeast of the mainland. Could turn icy here on Wednesday night as temperatures start to plummet. And we will keep clear skies for many, so that will allow those temperatures to fall for Thursday morning. A cold day then on Thursday. Some snow showers across parts of eastern England are possible, but for most a dry and a bright day, turning cloudier but staying on the cold side into the weekend.
Hello there, I'm Eamon.
And I'm Isabel.
And you're watching the GB News digital stream across the United Kingdom.
And around the world.
If you're here in the UK, you can also watch us on your TV screen. GB News is Freeview channel 236.
On Sky, we're channel 515.
626 on Virgin Media.
Just remember, you might need to retune your TV to watch the channel.
Yeah, and if you are doing that, find out more about retuning by going to gbnews.uk.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilized conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon.
And Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
All right, good morning, everybody. This is To The Point on GB News with me, Patrick Christys, and Mercy Muroki. We're on your TV, we're on your radio as well, and we've got loads coming for you in this next hour.
Yes, indeed, and keep getting in touch. GBViews at gbnews.uk. We'll be reading your views out throughout the rest of the hour. As usual, that's all coming up, but first, let's give you the latest news.
Good morning, it is 11 o'clock. I'm Rosie Wright. Let's get you up to date here on GB News. Now, the Deputy Prime Minister, Dominic Raab, says claims that Boris Johnson lied to Parliament are nonsense. The Prime Minister's former chief advisor, though, Dominic Cummings, says he was prepared to swear under oath that Boris Johnson lied to MPs when he said he'd not known beforehand about the number 10 garden drinks in May 2020. Well, Labour's Shadow Work and Pension Secretary, Jonathan Ashworth, says Tory MPs are backing the Prime Minister due to personal rather than national interests.
The question for Conservative MPs is, why are they putting up with this? I'll tell you why they're putting up with this. Because they're weighing up what they think is in their electoral interests, whether they should stick with this guy or get rid of him because of how that will impact on the next election. They should be making a decision in what is the national interest. Winston Churchill said country comes first, not political party. Tory MPs should have that in their mind today.
Well, in light of the party allegations, here at GB News, we conducted an exclusive poll which revealed that over 2/3 of voters believe that Boris Johnson has not told the truth about parties in Downing Street. 83% of Brits also believe the Prime Minister has clearly broken the government's own lockdown rules. And over 40% of voters no longer feel any obligation to obey lockdown restrictions if they were reintroduced. Now, in other news, magistrates will be given more sentencing powers in an attempt to reduce the backlog of criminal cases that built up during the pandemic. Magistrates will now be able to sentence more serious cases that would previously have gone to the Crown Court, such as fraud, theft and assault. They'll also be able to give jail terms of up to a year, which is double the current maximum of 6 months. Some critics have, however, called it a sticking plaster solution. The House of Lords has voted against government plans to clamp down on noisy protests. Crossbench peer Lord Covell tabled an amendment to the new crime bill, arguing the original bill could prohibit large, peaceful and well-organised demonstrations from taking place. Well, the amendment would ensure, for example, that there isn't a ban on loud protests in Parliament Square. Britain is supplying further self-defence weapons to Ukraine amid concerns over a possible Russian invasion. The UK Defence Secretary Ben Wallace says a small number of personnel will also provide training to Ukrainian forces, but he stressed British troops will not be deployed to fight Russians. Russia has amassed 100,000 soldiers, as well as tanks, rocket artillery and short-range ballistic missiles at their border with Ukraine. The brother of Angela Glover, the British woman who died in the Tongan tsunami, has paid tribute to her. The 50-year-old from Brighton was washed away on Saturday trying to rescue her dogs after an underwater volcano erupted and triggered a 10-metre tsunami. Her brother, Nick Eleni, spoke to GB News and says the family is heartbroken.
He radiated warmth and kindness. She was extremely popular. She's got so many people that have sort of expressed their condolences, people that that she's worked with in the past, and people that live in Tonga. She was my sister.
Well, New Zealand's military is currently unable to send essential supplies to Tonga, including drinking water. Their efforts are being hampered by thick ash, which is covering the airport runway following the eruption. Now, the number of employees on payroll has grown in December, but average pay fell in November for the first time in more than a year. The Office for National Statistics say the number of UK employees rose by 0.6% in December to nearly 30 million people. Well, figures also revealed that in the 3 months up to November, the unemployment rate fell back to almost where it was pre-pandemic. The BBC has criticised the government's choice to freeze the licence fee at £159 for the next 2 years. The Culture Secretary Nadine Dorries says that's going to help families struggling with the cost of living. But the broadcaster branded the decision disappointing, saying it will lead to tough choices that will impact the viewer experience. Experts in smell are suggesting that COVID infections might be making children fussy eaters. Well, it's down to them potentially suffering from parasmia, which is a disorder where people experience strange and unpleasant smell distortions. For example, chocolate smelling like petrol, lemon smelling like rotting cabbage. Well, Sarah Oakley, Executive Director of Absent, told GB News getting your smell back after catching a virus can take up to 2 years.
You have had your sense of smell that attacked high up in the nose by a virus. COVID-19 is particularly good at this. And it's destroyed some of those sensory neurons that carry the signals to our brain. And those neurons, fortunately, are designed to grow back. But while they're growing back, things are a bit muddled.
You are now up to date here on GB News. I'll bring you more as it happens. Now, back to the point.
Yes, good morning, everybody. This is To The Point on GB News with me, Patrick Christys, and Mercy Muroki. We're on your TV and we're on your radio as well. We are here all the way through until midday. Big stories, big guests, big opinions as well. So here's what's coming up.
Yes, we'll be speaking to a leading anti-Semitism charity about how to stop the current problems facing Jewish people in the UK, following on from the hostage crisis at a synagogue in Texas. We'll bring you more of that very shortly.
Indeed. Now, doctors have been facing problems throughout the pandemic. 1 in 4 now say they're so exhausted that their ability to do their job is being impaired. What do you make of that, ladies and gents? We'll be speaking to a doctor to find out What can be done about it, if indeed anything can be done?
Yes, and a worrying report on UK poverty suggests poorer families will be devastated by crippling energy prices unless urgent action is taken. But what exactly is the government planning to do to help poorer families? Well, we'll be talking about that.
Well, that's a bit of a flavour of what's to come over the next hour. Most importantly, we want your views, so email them in, gbviews@gbnews.uk. We'll be reading those throughout, but of course, right now, Mercy's going to give her view on something very important, actually. It's about children suffering from anxiety.
The word anxiety has been voted the Children's 2021 Word of the Year in an Oxford University survey of 8,000 pupils in Britain. Researchers at the Oxford University Press say 1 in 5 children surveyed chose anxiety as their number one word when asked how they would describe their well-being and experiences during lockdown. The words challenging and isolate took second and third place. Now, according to The Times, Helen Freeman, who's Director of Early Childhood and Home Education at the Oxford University Press, said this of the findings, and I quote, "The research highlights the vital role language plays for children when it comes to self-expression, learning and well-being. It's important now, more than ever, that we invest in supporting children's language development at home and in school." Now, with all due respect to Miss Freeman, she's completely missed the mark there, I think. The only thing this research highlights is how we've crippled children's will to live, how we, adults, have created an environment of unbridled fear around coronavirus, and how this has seeped into children's innocent little minds. But there's something else. If you look at the word of the year for the last few years for children, it tells quite an interesting story. 2021, anxiety. 2020, coronavirus. 2019, Brexit. 2018, plastic. 2017, Trump. And the children's top word for the year 2016, refugee. Now, it might not surprise you to know then that the survey of kids, which is done by the Oxford University Press, is commissioned by none other than the BBC. Now, I think that not only are we paralysing children with fear of COVID, but we're completely over-politicising their lives. I'm all for children learning about the world around them, but if Trump, Brexit and coronavirus, and worst of all, anxiety, are the words children are using to sum up their lives, then something's gone drastically wrong.
Yeah, those list of words is almost farcical, isn't it?
I mean, it kind of reveals the whole thing, doesn't it? Because, you know, there is an agenda, shall we say, to the BBC commissioning this piece of work, which they do for every year.
Do you reckon that's subliminal messaging? Sorry, do you reckon it's subliminal messaging? It's like, right, OK, look, think of a word, think of any word. Refugee, think of any word that you want to just say. Trump.
Well, it might as well be, because, look, OK, 8,000 children, it's not to be sniffed at. They have spoken to lots of children. What did you say?
Nothing.
Okay.
No, absolutely, yes.
They have spoken to a lot of children, but I really struggle to believe, shall we say, that Trump was the top word that children were using to describe their lived experience in whichever year that was, 2017. I mean, really, that's quite depressing, don't you think? If you ask your child, what's, on your mind this year, I would use the word Trump to describe how my year went.
Yeah, exactly. But do you not think anxiety is the top word, is the natural culmination of all of the ones that went before it? Refugee crisis, Trump, orange man,
plastic.
Bad. Then you got plastic, we're killing the planet. And then what was it, coronavirus? Any surprise now that the top word is anxiety? I mean,
yeah, exactly. Well, what do you... I think there is a line that has to be drawn, because, of course, we want the children to not be ignorant little twerps about the world. And so it's right that schools should teach them certain things about politics, about the environment, OK, fine. But I think we're just completely bombarding young people now with this stuff. And that is why their whole lives are characterised by these sorts of things. Brexit, for goodness sake. I mean, a primary school child shouldn't be thinking and talking about Brexit all year long.
But I do seriously think that there is a very serious point here, actually, which is that word anxiety in regards to children's top word. Now, this has caused huge anxiety for children, hasn't it? Our response to the coronavirus crisis. Making them wear masks in schools, especially the younger ones, of course. They do a lot of their early years learning by things like facial recognition and just getting to know human beings, really, in the way that we interact. That was denied from them. The isolation, constant stuff. I mean, it's no surprise, is it, that this has caused massive... And not just that as well. you know, when you see these videos that were doing the rounds of kids wrapped up head to toe, look like they've just gone to meet ETs, fresh off his spaceship, going to meet their grandma and granddad. I mean, what does that say to the kids? You could kill your grandma and granddad, you know?
Yeah, I mean, lots of kids started school this year, or kids who had sort of more pre-reception age or in nursery during lockdown, and then when they started school, when they start reception, lots of them had teachers were reporting that some kids barely knew how to interact with other children because they hadn't had that experience. So it isn't surprising necessarily that young children would be feeling anxious during the last couple of years at all. But get in touch with us, let us know what you think. But now, something else to be quite anxious about, I suppose. A worrying report on UK poverty suggests poorer families will be devastated by high energy prices unless urgent action is taken.
Well, charity the Joseph Rowntree Foundation found some families will need to spend more than half of their income on energy bills alone. This cannot be right, can it, people? Anyway, April, this is going to be coming into force in April, as the £20 universal credit uplift is removed. The energy cap increases. The cost of living continues to soar as well.
Yes, well, earlier on Breakfast, Eamon and Isabel spoke to the Shadow Secretary of State for Work and Pensions, Jonathan Ashworth, and asked him about this stark warning.
Do something about it. Well, the guy who's just up there in an office, Boris Johnson, he could do something about it. But of course, he's completely mired in all these scandals and his lies about his partying, that he's completely not focusing on this cost of living crisis, which is impacting working people across the country, and it's making working people significantly worse off, and it's going to get even worse this year. Well, they've got to do something because these rocketing heating bills is pushing up inflation. If you're pushing up inflation, that means the value of your wages will start stagnating. It means things like the pensions are being cut. That in itself will impact on growth. But the thing I would say to Boris Johnson is, you know, I know you're in a right mess with your partying, but the thing that I would say is that these energy companies are making fortunes. One of the big leaders at BP said it's like running a cash machine at the moment. How offensive is that? So we think you could put a windfall tax on their profits, and because you've had more receipts from VAT because of the energy bills going up, you could actually use that money to take the VAT off energy bills and expand the discount that those on lower incomes get. So you could put in place a package which means for a lot of people you've taken £600 off their heating bills this year. That would make a real difference. That would be real help now. There's no reason why Boris Johnson and Rishi Sunak couldn't get on with it, other than the fact that they're utterly distracted with the parties.
Oh, got one in at the end then.
Yeah, but, was waiting for that one.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it is absolutely shocking, and frankly, it's not tenable, right? The idea, whether you're on benefits or not, right? The idea that your energy bill can be around half your income.
Yeah,
there's people very close to me. Their energy bill was £2,500 a year, I think it was, £2,300 a year. It's gone up to £5,500.
What?
£5,500 it's risen by. It's risen to.
That's insane. I mean, and that's a standard
that's
sort of family house?
That's what they're pay for the year. Yeah, exactly. So if they've said you want to pay, you know, you get stuff in credit, that's what they've been quoted. That's insane.
Yeah, absolutely. And it doesn't help after everything we've been through over the last couple of years, particularly the poorest in this country. And the other point to make, actually, about all this is part of the reason, you know, why people might need to be using so much energy is because our homes aren't very well insulated in this country. And there is a group...
There is a group until they start insulating it.
There is a group who, if they had sensible tactics, could be actually pressuring the government into doing something about that. But instead, they chose that group, which I don't think I need to know, to disrupt everybody's lives, tie themselves to this, glue themselves to roads, smash things. And now that message has pretty much been lost. And now every time somebody hears about insulation, they roll their eyes.
Yeah.
Whereas actually, it's quite an important issue.
Yeah. Well, now they're insulate prison, aren't they? A lot of them. But I mean, they are to insulation what salt is to slugs. To be fair, I mean, they could have just gone about it the normal way.
Yeah.
We may well have had a perfectly reasonable conversation about insulating our homes and the fact that we need to do it. But alas, now we just hate it. Anyway.
Yes, well, let's go to some of your views. Now, Brian says Cummings has knocked Judas off the top seat, talking about the betrayal of Boris there. And to be honest, it's not a good look for Cummings either, is it? Because he has very much... He was the Prime Minister's closest aide, of course, throughout Brexit. now he's completely switched. He's completely turned on the Prime Minister. And I don't think people, like that kind of thing, that sort of snakiness.
No.
I don't think people like it, even if they disagree with Boris.
Yeah, and also, look, Dominic Cummings has got no moral credibility whatsoever.
That's the other thing, isn't
He's
it?
got absolutely zero moral credibility whatsoever. Drove to Barnard Castle to protect his eyesight, this, that and the other. I mean, come on now. The idea that Dominic Cummings has got any kind of leg to stand on with all this stuff, or indeed that he could be trusted, frankly, when it comes to this kind of thing.
Yes, it's this. I think that's why he said, well, I'll do it under oath. It's because he knows that anything he actually says, it doesn't have much credibility for lots of people. That's why he's saying, well, I'll do it under oath if you fancy.
Well, yeah.
Sylvia and Dorothy have said, thank you for playing the national anthem this morning. Very refreshing. We're from today, we've been playing out the national anthem, and we will continue to do every day just before we go on air about 5:59 in the morning. And of course, this is to mark the Jubilee year. So lots of people in the inbox saying thank you for doing that.
Yeah, there's lots of support for our national anthem, which isn't hardly a shock, is it? But I think it's a good thing. It's a good move for us as well. The only other thing maybe we do now is play it at midnight, but I'm not sure if we'll do that. So that's what the BBC. I think the BBC used to do that, didn't they? Anyway, right, lots of people getting in touch as well. Of course, about Boris. Will everyone get off Boris's back? Thousands of people broke COVID rules. The general public, celebrities, politicians. No, he should not go. He's done all he can, and that's from Joan in Manchester. Thank you very much, Joan. And as well, there was a good one here that I saw about children's words. There we go. Because you alluded to you didn't allude to, you told us that children's top words apparently of this year has been anxiety, which is terrifying. And June has been in touch. The words children learn come from parents and family. These are the people who are in crisis and so anxious, and thus it gets passed on. Everything comes from home, not school. Interesting. I think there's probably a happy medium there.
Interesting.
Someone else got in touch, just quickly, just to say their grandson's or granddaughter's top word was iPad. And I think that in itself it says a lot, doesn't it?
Yeah, it's just the new age we're living in, Patrick.
Do you think kids get tossed technology now just to shut them up? And
Well, yes, basically. And it's partly because parents are very busy, aren't they, often? Yeah. So that is the only distraction you can give them sometimes. But let us know what you think. Keep getting in touch. And after the break, we'll be talking about the attack on a Texas synagogue by a British national and the terror threat across the UK here at home as well. So we'll be right back. But first, here's the weather.
Hello again. Another dry day for the vast majority today. A mixture of cloud, sunshine, with some places staying misty with fog, and it's not dry everywhere. We do have some rain across Northern Ireland and Western Scotland, courtesy of this weather front. But it's bumping up against an area of high pressure, so it will be weakening as it crosses into Western Scotland. But it's bringing some wet weather through the morning and into the early afternoon across Northern Ireland for sure, and it will turn damp in Western Scotland during the afternoon. Elsewhere, most places dry, plenty of sunshine over northern England, parts of North Wales, East Anglia too, but there is patchy cloud across the south and some places not really getting rid of the overnight fog, staying quite misty and murky, and if that happens, temperatures are really going to struggle, but with some sunshine, we should see temperatures generally close to average, 7 to maybe 10 Celsius. We'll see a bit more of that patchy rain just crossing through the central belt of Scotland this evening, and then it stays fairly wet over the Highlands, Western Isles and the Northern Isles overnight. Some patchy rain, perhaps at times drifting into Northern England, and things turn damp later in the night through the early hours across Northern Ireland. It'll be a milder night, particularly so across the north, but even further south, you could see some patchy fog and maybe a little bit of frost in rural areas, but generally temperatures holding up. More cloud then on Wednesday, certainly for Northern England initially and across the Midlands and Wales, a bit of rain early in the morning. That moves southwards and it'll bring the odd spot of rain across East Anglia and the southeast. As that clears through, brighter but colder weather will arrive, but temperatures through the day should still, at least for a time, get up to double figures across the south. But colder air is arriving in the far north. Some wintry showers likely over the Northern Isles and the northeast of the mainland. Could turn icy here on Wednesday night as temperatures start to plummet, and we will keep clear skies for many, so that will allow those temperatures to fall for Thursday morning. A cold day then on Thursday. Some snow showers across parts of eastern England are possible, but for most a dry and a bright day, turning cloudier but staying on the cold side into the weekend.
Hello there, I'm Eamon.
And I'm Isabel.
And you're watching the GB News digital stream across the United Kingdom.
And around the world.
If you're here in the UK, you can also watch us on your TV screen. GB News is Freeview channel 236.
On Sky, we're channel 515.
626 on Virgin Media.
Just remember, you might need to retune your TV to watch the channel.
Yeah, and if you are doing that, find out more about retuning by going to gbnews.uk.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon.
And Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Join me, Mark White, here on GB News. For more than 2 decades, I've been at the sharp end of reporting crime and security at home and abroad. From the scourge of terrorism to the fight against violent crime and the deepening small boats crisis in the Channel, they're issues you rightly care about, and so do I. As GB News Home and Security Editor, my focus will be on the stories that matter to you.
Morning, everyone. It is 11:24. This is To The Point with me, Patrick Christys, and Mercy Muroki. And, of course, we're on your TV and we're on your radio.
Yes, and we're just going to give you an update on a story we've been reporting for the last couple of days. On Saturday, an armed attacker held 4 people hostage at a synagogue in Texas. Malik Faisal Akram, who's a British Muslim from Blackburn, was shot dead after an 11-hour standoff with police.
Well, the attacker sparked a national conversation on the issue of anti-Semitism in Muslim communities and about terror threats here at home and abroad. And in fact, it's actually just been revealed in the last few moments that Akram was known to MI5. Yeah, absolutely.
Well, let's go to Wasiq, who's Associate Fellow at the Henry Jackson Society and a founding trustee as well for the charity Muslims Against Anti-Semitism. Thank you for your time this morning. Obviously, a really hot topic, isn't it? Terrorism. We're on a high terror threat in this country still. We remain on that. And what do you make of what's happened so far? Because we've had some details emerge about this particular incident in particular. But is there a broader problem around anti-Semitism from Muslim communities in this country?
Yes, well, thank you for having me on. And this is quite a serious topic to be discussing. What I would like to start off with that is that the vast majority of Muslims, British Muslims, are law-abiding citizens, and they're family-oriented. They're hardworking. They're peaceful. But that's not to say that there isn't an issue of anti-Semitism in the British Muslim community, and it's a diverse community. It's not a monolithic community, and the problem stems back quite far. It comes from both religious texts. It comes from also issues surrounding Israel and Palestine, and that then reverberates here in terms of how British Muslims then manifest that in their actions. So it is something that's been bubbling up for some time, and now we've seen it export itself over to America, where a synagogue was where four Jews were taken hostage in a synagogue in terms of trying to release an Al-Qaeda, lady Al-Qaeda, Afia Siddiqui. And this raises serious questions for our security services and also us as a British Muslim community.
It also raises serious questions on how on earth he was allowed to get into America and stay there and do this attack as well, because he did have a criminal record, apparently, according to his family. Yeah. He was now, as it's emerged, known to MI5. I mean, goodness me, one would assume. I mean, America don't tend to mess around when it comes to their border checks, do they? Have you ever been to an American airport? It's quite an intimidating event. So, I mean, I'm surprised he got in. But just on the issue of anti-Semitism, obviously it's mired, isn't it, really, by the Israel-Palestine issue. And I think there's that blurring of the lines sometimes between, I suppose, anti-Semitism and anti-Zionism. And do you think that gets lost all too often?
It does indeed, and I think what we've seen, and there's evidence of it, where lots of British Muslims view all Jews as Zionists or Zionists as Jews, and they use anti-Zionism as a front for their anti-Semitism. So what they do is they will use the rhetoric of, we're just against the policies of Israel. Israel is an apartheid state. They're carrying out ethnic cleansing. And because it's linked to the Jewish religion and Jewish people, because it's designed as a homeland for them, as a sanctuary for them, that then is the way or the route that they use, at least, to be anti-Semitic, but try to do it under the cloak of anti-Zionism. And we saw this again last year in the protests that took place up and down the country during the months of May and June, where lots of anti-Zionist rhetoric and anti-Israel rhetoric was taking place. But at the same time, seeing placards with anti-Semitism being broadcast, and we were seeing lots of YouTube videos, social media posts, and lots of British Muslims who are anti-Semitic were feeling emboldened because nobody was doing anything about it. And this is seriously concerning for law enforcement, who seem unable to actually tackle this issue.
Yes.
Yeah, indeed. And you're absolutely spot on. You know, there's people who drove through St John's Wood. There was also, there's loads of events that took place. Then people walking down the streets, weren't they, shouting various, really disgraceful things with a police escort. Police didn't seem to be doing too much. But Wazik, thank you very much. Make sure that you come on again very, very soon. Associate Fellow at the Henry Jackson Society.
Thank you for joining us. Let's go to some of your views now. Lots of views coming in. We've been speaking about some very hot topics this morning, haven't we? Somebody, who's this, Steve, has said, I can't believe you had Jonathan Ashworth on giving his opinion. What a bumbling fool. If he'd been in charge of the vaccine and COVID, most of us would be dead. Which, I mean, look, I mean, it's a strong opinion, Steve, but the man is Shadow Secretary of State for Work and Pensions. If Labour happened to be in government, and they're ahead in the polls right now, that man would be in control of, one of the biggest government departments, over £200 billion budget. So, his office is, you have to respect the office he has, and he's a shadow minister, and we have him on.
Yes, we certainly do, absolutely. Carol's been in touch. I set my alarm this morning for the national anthem. It's heartening to see so many spooked Ramonas all over the tabloid articles on GBNews, and we actually have a cup of their tears here. So I can just...
Cheers.
Cheers. Right, OK, yes. And also, people calling for us to get Dominic Cummings on. We seriously are trying to get Dominic Cummings on, because obviously we want to kind of clear up who's telling the truth and who's not over Partygate and Boris Johnson, etc. And when it comes to the cost of living as well, we were just speaking about that. Let us know how you're finding things at the minute. You can do it anonymously if you want. You know, are you struggling with the cost of living at the moment? Is your energy bill just simply sky high? What's hitting you in the pocket? I want to know specifically what it is that's getting you, if indeed it is.
Yeah.
Just let us know. GBnews.uk.
And I suspect because of the changes in April that come forward in terms of energy, I suspect that's when most people, with that price cap, that's when most people really start to feel the effects of the energy prices rising.
Yeah, someone alluded to as well. I didn't say it was my house that was charging £5,000 a year for the energy bill. Someone's told me to switch.
How many bedrooms does
switch
that
the
house
heating
have?
off in the West Wing and ballroom and sit in the sitting room, which is, I think, slightly unfair, Russell. That's certainly not my house. No,
okay.
Don't worry. Just sort of clear that
well,
up. No.
After the break, we'll be taking a look at burnout in the NHS, following a report that 1 in 4 doctors say they feel too tired to the point of impairment. They're not being able to do their job as they should do because they're exhausted. But before that, a look at this morning's news.
Good morning, it's 11:32. I'm Rosie Wright on GB News. Let's get you up to date. The Deputy Prime Minister, Dominic Raab, has described claims that Boris Johnson lied to Parliament as nonsense. Boris Johnson's former chief advisor, though, Dominic Cumming, says he's prepared to swear under oath that the Prime Minister lied to MPs when he said he didn't know beforehand about the Number 10 garden party in May of 2020. Well, GB News has carried out an exclusive poll to find out what the British public make of the fallout. It reveals over 2/3 believe Boris Johnson has not told the truth about parties in Downing Street. 83% of Brits also believe the Prime Minister has clearly broken the government's own lockdown rules. And over 40% of voters no longer feel any obligation to obey lockdown restrictions if they were reintroduced. Now, in other news, magistrates will be given more sentencing powers in an attempt to reduce the backlog of criminal cases that built up during the pandemic. They'll now be able to hear more serious cases, such as fraud, theft and assault, and give jail terms of up to a year. Britain is supplying further self-defence weapons to Ukraine amid concerns over a possible Russian invasion. The UK Defence Secretary Ben Wallace says a small number of personnel will also provide training to Ukrainian forces, but stressed British troops will not be deployed to fight Russians. Russia has amassed 100,000 soldiers at their border with Ukraine. Huge crowds have gathered for the funeral of Aisling Murphy in County Offaly in Ireland. School children lined the streets holding instruments and photos of the murdered primary school teacher. The Irish Taoiseach Micheál Martin and President Michael D. Higgins are both in attendance. The 23-year-old was killed while running along the Grand Canal in Tullamore. You're now up to date here on GB News. We're on your TV, online and DAB Plus radio. I'll keep you up to date across the afternoon.
Hello there, I'm Eamon.
And I'm Isabel.
And you're watching the GB News digital stream across the United Kingdom.
And around the world.
If you're here in the UK, you can also watch us on your TV screen. GB News is Freeview channel 236.
On Sky, we're channel 515.
626 on Virgin Media.
Just remember, you might need to retune your TV to watch the channel.
Yeah, and if you are doing that, find out more about retuning by going to gbnews.uk.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon
and Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
Yes, morning everyone, it's 11:36. This is To The Point. I'm Patrick Christys, that's Mercy Muroki, and we're on GB News. We're live on your TV and your radio.
Nice pointing there.
Smoothly done, I think. Anyway, right, 1 in 4 doctors are so tired, apparently, that they struggle to treat patients. This is according to a recent poll. Now, a report by the Medical Defence Union has found that longer hours, growing caseloads and staff shortages are to blame for extreme tiredness amongst medics, causing memory issues and much, much more.
Yes, well, almost 6 in 10 doctors say their sleep patterns have worsened during the pandemic. And Dr. Lawrence Gerlis joins us now to discuss this. Good morning. Isn't this just part of the job? Of course you're going to be tired. Of course, if there's a national pandemic, your workload's going to increase. That's just the reality, isn't it?
I think that was my initial reaction. I've been a bit hard on GPs recently. I think they shut down for too long, too comprehensively. They should have stayed open for patients who weren't obviously positive for COVID. And they've had a lot of criticism. You only have to read social media to see how unhappy patients are with GPs, who are the doctors covered in this particular survey. I think the Medical Defence Union, which is an insurance company that covers some doctors, are starting this fight back. And I think it is fair to say that doctors no longer spend half a day on the golf course and they're not sitting there coining it. They do work very hard because there is a huge demand, an increasing demand on them, and there's a shortage. So I'm sure this is real. I'm surprised it's only 1 in 4 doctors who say they're too tired. I thought it'd be most of them. And as you say, Mercy, it is part of the job. A lot of people have had a hard time during the pandemic. We stayed open. We didn't stop seeing patients face to face. It's been a tough time. My body's now in the habit of waking up at 5 o'clock every morning to go through my test results and to catch up on the patients of the previous day, and I can't get out of that habit. So my sleep pattern is definitely disturbed. I can attest to that.
I hope that's all right for you, but it is good news for us because it means when we call you at 5 o'clock in the morning to try and get you on the show, we know you're always up and about. But look, I know that in a lot of clinical negligence cases, for example, tiredness is cited as one of the big reasons for mistakes being made and things like that. The procedural issues as well, of course. But actually, in a practical sense, what impact is this having on patients, do you think? What impact could it have on patients? You've got a very tired doctor.
Well, I think you mentioned clinical negligence, and it's the MDU, the insurance company, that's produced this report. And I'm sure the pandemic is going to produce a raft of claims, partly because, remote consultations are more likely to miss things. Doctors have been too busy, too tired. I suspect that the courts will take a lenient view if cases come to trial, because I think the pandemic has produced exceptional circumstances. I know the General Medical Council are certainly taking a liberal view for GPs. They're understanding that things have been tough. But at the end of the day, as you say, it's the patients who may have suffered any alleged negligence who have come off badly because they've not been able to access GP services in the usual way. And some of them have been fobbed off with remote consultations when they should have been seen face to face.
Yes, and one of the solutions that the Health Secretary has now come up with, as been reported in the papers this morning, is academy school style NHS revolution, it's being called, reforming the NHS. So more successful hospitals are given that freedom, sort of a sense of deregulation, I suppose, for the more successful hospitals. What's your initial reaction to these plans?
Well, I've seen on social media immediately people talking about privatisation. But as we've said before on this programme, we need to shake up the NHS, because one of the strange things about it is I know patients are unhappy. We've heard from this report that doctors are unhappy. So both parties to this process are very unhappy. And we can't go on like this. You can't just magic more GPs. They simply aren't there. I don't want anyone to keep telling me we're going to recruit more GPs. They don't exist. We shouldn't be stealing doctors from other countries anyway. We haven't. It takes too long to train a GP. There's not an immediate solution. If the hospital academies improve the service, that's going to be a good thing. But at the end of the day, there's not an easy solution to any of this. The demand is huge. It's free at the point of use. There's uncontrolled demand. I know when I worked as an NHS GP, I felt like King Canute. The demand was overwhelming. And it is a very, very stressful and hard job. Let's not make any excuses for that. It is absolutely tough. But we need to look at the whole system and find a way that both patients and doctors can live with a service that works for both of them.
Yeah, just very quickly, Dr. Lawrence, very quickly, you alluded to there exactly, excuse me, who this report was commissioned by and put by this survey is 1 in 4 doctors feeling tired. And it is what? It is the insurance company, is it, that they would use? If
it is the insurance company. So they're going to advocate on behalf of the doctors. That's their job, yeah.
OK, cool. Well, it's worth noting. But look, thank you very much for that, as always, and thank you very much for being up bright and early as well. Dr. Lawrence Shirley is there, of course, whizzing you through all of that.
I think it's so unhelpful for when we talk about reforming the NHS and then people instantly jump to, no, see, the Tories want to privatise the NHS. Can't we just have a sensible discussion? And is privatisation all that bad? There's lots of different healthcare system models that we can use, we can learn from all over the world. And let's be honest, none of those entail a nationally run healthcare system that's free at the point of use for everyone all the time. So there does have to be some aspects of privatisation.
Especially if we've got a massively increasing population as well.
Yeah.
I mean, this is
it's just unsustainable, really. I think that's just the basic point.
It is. Right, well, we're moving away from that right now, and we're going to talk about Adele, that's right. Adele will kick off her Las Vegas residency at Caesars Palace this weekend and will reportedly make £500,000 per night across the 3 months she's there. Starting to go off, Adele.
Well, her performance... Yeah, that
made it.
I mean, £500,000, it's an insane... Especially when we're talking about people just barely getting by and struggling to pay their bills. It seems like a monumental amount, which it is, but she's earned it. Somebody's willing to pay to listen to her, and so that's just what it is, isn't it?
Seems, obviously, it's only anecdotal evidence, isn't it? You see from interviews, various interviews, she's pretty sound. I mean, fair play to her, and she has got a cracking set of pipes.
Oh, gosh, I was wondering what you were going to say there.
So was I for a while. Anyway, an ITV documentary is debuting tonight, which will allege that Prince Andrew would throw a tantrum if he discovered his prized collection of around 50 to 60 stuffed toys were moved without his permission.
Yes, well, household staff were under strict instructions, apparently, to place the teddy bears exactly as he liked them on his bed, with a laminated photograph given as a guide. Because, of course, if they didn't put them back correctly, the Duke of York would apparently shout and scream and behave verbally abusive. That's what his former Royal Protection Officer will claim.
Yes, he worked for the Prince from 1998 to 2004 and had access to his private quarters during that time. These are all obviously allegations.
Yes, they are.
But it's a weird thing to make up.
It is a weird thing to make up. And the key detail here that I was concerned about is how old was he? Because if he was 3 years old, then you're fine. He has a few teddies, who cares? But I mean, 1998 to 2004, he was definitely a grown man.
He was? Hang on a minute, that's absolutely correct. Yeah, goodness me. Well, I imagine he denies the allegations.
When this we'll have more details, I suppose.
Right,
when
someone
the allegations
beavering away to find out how old Prince Andrew allegedly was while he was throwing tantrums about his teddies, please. I want
yes,
to
allegedly, So yeah, we'll have the full details of what that person alleged, I suppose, when that airs a bit later.
Yes. Researchers from Rice University in Texas say that some plants are at risk of extinction as crucial seed-carrying animals move to cooler parts of the world to escape global warming.
Yes, well, joining us now is Dr. Christian Dunn, Senior Lecturer at Bangor University. Thank you so much for joining us. Just explain to us in layman's terms what this exactly means.
OK, so basically the climate is changing. Plants are, by definition, they're pretty stationary, so they can't move away if the climate, so the weather patterns and the climate where they are, starts to change to become inhospitable for them to exist. They can't move quickly like an animal can. And so what's happening, though, we used to have animals used to help disperse the seed, or do help disperse the seeds of lots of plants. Around half the amount of species of plants rely on animals to spread their seeds. But what we're happening now is we're not just facing a climate crisis, we're facing a biodiversity crisis. And that means many plants and many animals are now no longer in those areas. And so they can't help disperse the seeds for those plants so that they can't move with the changing climate to areas that they can exist in. So it is a very serious issue.
Serious issue, but I do have to say, whenever we talk about the environment, which is an important topic to discuss, we do get lots of viewers emailing in saying, look, I can barely pay my council tax bill, like I don't have time to care about the environment. So how would you sell it to people who are facing more immediate problems, shall we say, that actually they do need to care about the environment?
There's no global warming in their own homes, is there?
Well, fortunately, I'm a scientist, not a politician, so I don't have to do that. Yeah. But what I will say is that the environment, our ecosystems, we are all totally reliant on them. If we don't have clean, healthy environments, habitats, we don't have clean water, we don't have fresh air, we have climates that is completely inhospitable for us to live in, let alone the plants and the animals. So we have to take this seriously, and it is starting to affect people. Yes, okay, in Britain, it's not, in most places, it's not really affecting us, this changing climate. If you go to other countries, other parts of the world, we are starting to see the changing climate affecting people, affecting them. And so we do have to take it seriously. And let's face it, we all love being outside. We all love natural areas. We know the last lockdown showed us that we need to be outside for our well-being, mental and kind of physical. And if those areas start to become, biodiverse, no biodiversity there, no wildlife, nothing that we enjoy, then we will all be a lot less happy. And I don't think that's a good thing.
No, well, it's definitely not. It's definitely not. Look, thank you very much. It's, of course, Dr. Christian Dunn there, Senior Lecturer at Bangor University. Thank you very much for giving the hard sell as well to why we should really care about the environment. I mean, I was in the Lake District at the weekend, actually, and I must say the quality of air there is unbelievable compared to when you rampaging across London. It's choking. Well, as soon as you get out there, you just feel better. The water quality's better.
That's true. Nature, I mean, lots of studies have been done about this, and it reveals being outside in nature, it's immensely good for your mental health, for your physical health, for everything. And so, of course, we should have more cleaner air, that's for sure. Now, let's go to some of your views.
Okay.
You asked actually, to the viewers and listeners to let us know what exactly they're facing in terms of spending their rising costs for them, for their household. Rob in Hampshire here says council tax is our problem. 21% of our entire income, he says, is going on council tax. So a whole fifth of his income there.
Dear me. This person's asked to remain anonymous, absolutely fine. My bill has gone up from £80 to £153. I'm disabled. I never got the £20 uplift, and I'm on disability, presumably disability benefits, would imagine. How can we find extra money? It's ridiculous. And I think, that individual there sums it up, right, for a lot of people. Thank you very much for getting in touch, obviously, and I hope everything improves for you in your circumstances there. But I think it's important to just try and humanise this, really. How is the cost of living increases affecting you? How are the energy prices affecting you? Especially if you've got kids, for example. Are you going without? Are you making some difficult choices? How is it affecting?
Yes, well, that I don't know, £60 difference that person will now have to find. That could be somebody's entire monthly budget for food, for example.
Absolutely.
So it could be the difference between them being able to buy their children, new clothes or not. So absolutely massive for lots of people up and down the country.
Lance has got an interesting take. Lance, thank you very much, Lance. Put a temporary VAT cut on alcohol and cigarettes. This would be hugely popular amongst the less wealthy and would quite possibly pay their fuel bills.
Well, yes, they might find that they have other problems down the line if they consume too much of it. So I'm not sure
that's a foolproof plan.
But Colin here says, could you imagine if Labour were in charge? We wouldn't have a vaccine. This was, I suppose, off the back of us, GB News, earlier speaking to Jonathan Ashworth. he's a shadow minister for Department for Work and Pensions. Some people querying why we're even speaking to him. They think he's a bit of a bumbling fool, but he is still a shadow minister. But what I think about this, I think it's an interesting take about if Labour were in charge during the vaccine rollout. I don't think we should attribute the success of the vaccine rollout to politicians. They want us to do that because it allows Boris Johnson to say, well, look at the vaccine rollout. I've done such a great job. Actually, it's down to the scientists who put in this country.
The acquisition of the vaccines was political, wasn't it?
Yeah, but it wasn't Boris Johnson. I don't think if we had a Labour Prime Minister, there would have been much more different in terms of the vaccine sort of rollout, or indeed the vaccine being created in the first place. So I'm a bit sceptical about attributing too much accountability and responsibility.
The potential difference, obviously all this is hypothetical, but if we'd had Jeremy Corbyn, for example, or Keir Starmer, I suspect we'd have been more inclined to have followed the EU's vaccine rollout, which was pretty slow. Whereas it does appear to me anyway that Boris, or whoever he put in charge of the acquisitions, was pretty cut and dry about the fact that these are coming to Britain now.
Yeah, well, it's hard to actually know, I suppose, what would have happened if somebody like Keir Starmer was in charge, because he just has followed everything the government's done pretty much throughout the whole pandemic. So I'm not actually quite sure what his own personal view about everything is.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, as well as there's someone here who did not ask me to keep their name private, so I won't. Karen, I'm seriously struggling and extremely concerned about rising energy prices. I really don't know where all this money is going to come from. I'm not on benefits, would not qualify for any help. Eat less is the only alternative I have. This is devastating stuff, ladies and gents. No luxuries in the house. It feels like a third world country at the moment, she says. Scrap this green nonsense. We did not vote for it. There we go. Look, I'm inclined to believe, again, very, very sorry about this. It is shocking the amount that's going up. And get this as well, from a little personal experience, my energy bill is going up, but they've put me on the wrong tariff, right? I had to then chase that. I've had to give them meter readings. So they go, oh, it's all right, well, now you're in credit.
Yeah.
Well, I don't want to be in credit to you. I want my money.
Yes, exactly. I think, and that happened to a lot of people, didn't it? Because they switched energy providers and they're put on, God knows what tariff. And it's all very confusing, actually, quite frankly. But yes, once April hits and that price cap rises, then this problem will definitely get worse, sadly.
I think we're going to see demonstrations on this. I've got to be honest with you. I really do think we're going to see people out there on the streets, because at the end of the day, if you open your wallet and there's nothing in there, you get very angry, right? And if something isn't being done about it, then fair play. Well, we are going to just chat about something else, I believe, now, right at the end of the show. Magistrates will be given more sentencing powers in an attempt to reduce the backlog of criminal cases that built up during the pandemic.
Yes, they'll be now able to give jail terms of up to a year, which is double the current maximum of 6 months that they can give. Some critics have, however, called it a sticking plaster solution.
Well, it is, because a load of magistrates' courts have closed. So that isn't very much sticking plaster solution. There are now cases, especially up north, plenty of cases up north, where you have to travel something like an hour and a half just to get to court. So what happens? Given some of the people.
And I suppose, we don't even have enough. Prisons aren't doing very well, are they, in terms of their capacity to even house more people who are sent to jail? So probably not the greatest solution ever. But again, it's this. We're seeing at the moment lots of solutions to all sorts of problems that don't really seem like great long-term strategies, do they? And everything these days just feels really chaotic. Every time a politician or the government offers up a solution to a problem, it doesn't seem like it will have longevity.
No, it doesn't. I think sticking plaster does seem to be where we are. And of course, as well, the Duchess of Sussex has complained now to the BBC about comments made by broadcaster Amol Rajan, who claimed the Duchess had, quote, misled the High Court in her legal battle with the Mail on Sunday over the letter to her father.
Yes, while recounting the legal case on his podcast, Harry, Meghan and the Media, that's what the podcast is called, Rajan said, initially, Meghan Markle had said she hadn't helped Scobie with the book. She apologised for misleading the court on this. Seems the Duchess took issue with this as the BBC was forced to put out a statement saying the Duchess of Sussex has asked us to clarify that she apologised to the court for not remembering email exchanges.
She's like a meerkat, isn't she? The second her name's mentioned, what did you say? What did you say?
Yeah.
Completely factually accurate. You can see, can you imagine trying to have an argument with her? She leaves the room, you just mutter something under your breath. She's Joe, what was that?
I think that's most women.
OK, well, you can say it. All right, well, thank you very much. On that note, thank you very much. We are done now for To The Point, but don't go away, ladies and gentlemen. We'll be back tomorrow. Gloria Di Piero is in the hot seat now for the briefing.
Hello again. Another dry day for the vast majority today. A mixture of cloud, sunshine, with some places staying misty with fog, and it's not dry everywhere. We do have some rain across Northern Ireland and Western Scotland, courtesy of this weather front. But it's bumping up against an area of high pressure, so it will be weakening as it crosses into Western Scotland. But it's bringing some wet weather through the morning and into the early afternoon across Northern Ireland for sure, and it will turn damp in Western Scotland during the afternoon. Elsewhere, most places dry, plenty of sunshine over northern England, parts of North Wales, East Anglia too, but there's patchy